Oddly enough, yeah, more or less. I always wanted to be involved somehow in astronomy, in science generally, but generally space science, because growing up the Apollo era was just coming to a close, and I got quite excited about landing on the moon. I wanted to know, the first question which I asked my dad, it was at Great Yarmouth in a caravan, where it was where did the moon come from? And my dad said a chunk of the Earth came off, and that's what formed the Pacific Ocean. And I didn't really quite believe that, but that was the theory at one time. And so I started reading and getting involved with it, and it was one of the subjects I really picked up upon and really got involved. And as time moved on, I got involved with the Planetary Society, promoting space science and getting involved in projects, eclipse projects and Mars rover projects, which was one of the things we were heavily involved in.
Brilliant. So obviously still a big astronomy fan now. And I believe today is a particularly special day in the world of astronomy.
It's big because the data came back to say that the spacecraft New Horizons successfully flown past Pluto after its mission, which launched in 2006 for its very fast mission to get there. It was relatively quick to get there, and it's the first images we're ever going to get back, close-up images of Pluto. And probably
we're seeing some images now as well.
Yes, this is it flying in, and there's one of those fantastic images, because we look at a planetary body and we judge what's going on the surface by how many craters we can see. And in parts of it you can clearly see that there are no craters because the surface has changed. Now, why has that surface changed? Has it caused by movement of ice? Has it been caused by volcanic activity? Or is the atmosphere freezing out on the surface? The colour suggesting, of course, that we're having methane, ice and slush on the ground there with carbon monoxide. But it does have a nitrogen atmosphere, one of only 4 worlds that does. Earth, of course, has a nitrogen atmosphere. Triton, a moon of Neptune, which is probably very similar to Pluto, and Titan, a large moon of Saturn, all have these atmospheres. So it's interesting to compare them all. But the early data that we've got for Pluto is absolutely
we see it as well now in relation to the Earth there.
Yes, quite small compared to the size. It's only 1,400 miles across. And it has, of course, this moon called Charon, which is actually with it, which is quite interesting because Charon is only 12,000 miles away from Pluto. But what's remarkable about that is, in comparison to the size of its parent body, it's actually quite large. You can see on a model I've got, and you can see it there beautifully on the picture there. That's actually quite large, relatively speaking. And they are gravitationally tied in such a way that only one side of Pluto ever faces Charon, and one side of Charon only ever faces Pluto.
So if, for example, someone did live on Pluto, the one side would never see.
If you're living on one side of it, you will never see Charon.
Okay.
And then if you lived on the inside of the orbit, then you always see Charon in the sky as a fixture. Very unusual. In fact, we really don't look upon it as a dwarf planet and its moon. We look upon it really as a double planet system.
But it's got other moons, hasn't it? Not just Charon.
Yes, it has. It has 4 other moons which are actually relatively quite small and were discovered by the Hubble Space Telescope. And we think they were probably pieces of Pluto blasted off when there was a large impact on it, blasting this rock. And this material is now orbiting Pluto, which is quite dramatic in many respects. No rings as detected so far, which is quite an important discovery, because there could have been ring debris from those impacts. And with the spacecraft travelling at around 30,000 miles per hour, even hitting something the size of a grain of rice could have destroyed the spacecraft. We knew very little, surprisingly enough. Discovered in 1930, just really as a point of light. And that was it, really. We did some spectroscopic analysis, the best you could do, and there was still very little until much later in the 78 we discovered, or James Christie discovered a large moon, which was Charon. And then as Pluto passed in front of some stars, you could then start to take some measurements. And they found that some of the stars flickered slightly before they went behind the planet, which meant that Pluto had an atmosphere. So we knew, and surprised, that it had some sort of an atmosphere. But you know how far away it is from us, so you know full well what sort of an atmosphere, what sort of surface it must have.
So how many miles? Is it
well, we're looking at, it ranges from 3 to 3.5, nearly 4 billion miles away. It's on a very elliptical orbit, and it's 248 years to orbit the Sun. And it cuts inside the orbit of Neptune, and it's also at an angle, which makes it a bit more exciting. So with those low temperatures of minus 238 degrees Celsius, you know what's probably going to be on the surface. You're talking about icy material. You're also talking about its atmosphere freezing on its surface as well. So a nitrogen frozen on its surface, methane on its surface. And as time went on with things like the Hubble Space Telescope, Hubble managed to discover 4 more moons, was able to make better analysis of it to show us that it had some various shading across it. The contrast of the world was quite remarkable, and that surprised us
it again
to a certain thing. And it was able to actually give us an indication of those shadings that you can actually see there now. So the question is, what is causing those shadings? With Charon being a relatively large moon and relatively close to it, you're going to get strong tidal forces happening in the interior of Pluto that should cause some heating up. So you would have expected, therefore, to see some activity around the equator of this world, which is initially what we've actually started to see. And over the next 16 months, as data is slowly being transmitted back to us, we're going to actually see that in extreme detail.
So obviously we've got pictures today, but there's more to look forward to.
Oh, there's a lot more. We've only had, what we've had is we've had the basic data has come through so far on the fly-in. Hopefully about 8 o'clock our time tonight, we're going to see at least 2 or 3 good close-up pictures. But over 16 months, we're going to start getting all the data back. It's taken so long because it takes 4.5 hours to get a signal back from the spacecraft. It's also running at 3 kilobits a second, so it's very, very slow. So we're going to have over a year of great excitement waiting for this data. And it's not just the pictures, of course. There's the temperature measurements to be made of it, the full mass measurements to work out, what the interaction is between Pluto's atmosphere and Charon, because Charon has a polar cap. Where does the material come from for the polar cap? It doesn't have its own atmosphere. So is atmosphere transferring from Pluto? And that could be a remarkable thing to see.
So obviously in the next few months there'll be a lot to figure out, and obviously it's been, the camera set off 2006 it set off.
Yes,
What I'm interested to know is how is it powered, because it's a long time.
Well, what you have here is you have some reaction thrusters on board, and that just changes its position slightly. But we're under the guidance of Isaac Newton, as we always say. It's on gravity. Once you throw a spacecraft 25,000 miles per hour away from the Earth, the sun's gravity will grab it and pull it into an orbit around the sun. Now, if you shoot it off at the right angle and at the right speed, the idea was to get this spacecraft to fly straight towards or angle towards Jupiter. It then took what's called a slingshot. Jupiter's gravity grabbed hold of it and swung it like you would with a sling. And that sped it up even further at the right angle to rendezvous with Pluto as Pluto came across in its orbit. And it's a very, very technically brilliant piece of work to actually achieve. And
so it's getting the pictures now. How much longer will it be there for?
Well, it's flown straight through the system. This is what's called a flyby mission. It doesn't stay. We don't have it's certainly too small a spacecraft to have engines to slow it down to stay in orbit. So it's flown straight through the system. A dramatic system. Because the other exciting thing for us here, Pluto, like Earth, is upright. Pluto isn't, it's actually on its side. So you've got the moons going around like this, and it's actually flown through the system almost. Make sure it doesn't hit anything, which was a big key thing. And now it's on its way, it's over 1 million miles away now, heading out into deep space. I mean, some of these people have been working 15, 16 years on this project, and it's just this elation of excitement suddenly explodes that it's worked. I mean, getting it there was exciting enough. I mean, they've got it and they've got the first images back. Then they had to wait to get a signal back to say that I've gone past the system, I've taken the photographs, and everything's working. So they had to wait, and that came through very early this morning when the spacecraft signaled back and said, yes, it's worked, we're happy. And then they immediately sent a signal back. So it's 4.5 hours to receive a signal, 4.5 hours to get a signal back to the spacecraft saying, continue your work, keep taking as many photographs and data as you can. So then they sit back then a bit and allow the spacecraft just keep doing as much science as it can for them then to receive it. So it's a fantastic amount of excitement. And
obviously big occasion, because this also marks the end of the exploration of the solar system as we know it.
Yes, this is the end of the beginning, if you like. We started in the 1960s with flying to Venus, and then of course we've been to Mars since several times, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Ceres, which is now called a dwarf planet as well, Uranus and Neptune by the Voyager 2 spacecraft, and now we finally got Pluto in the can as well.
Yeah.
And so it is really a landmark moment, because
Yeah.
this is the end of the first survey of the solar system by humankind. And it's very exciting, because people alive now, we are the very first to see these worlds close up.
Yeah.
In 1,000 years' time, people will look back and envy us
Yeah.
that we were the first
Yeah.
to see what these worlds look like. Very exciting stuff.
So what's next? What's the next plan?
Well, that's next now. If the spacecraft is healthy, they're going to try and manoeuvre it towards what's called the Kuiper Belt object.
Okay.
The Kuiper Belt, which Pluto is thought to be part of, are icy worlds, which are the remains of the formation of the solar system, part of the formation. And there are hundreds of thousands of these objects, and the Hubble telescope has spotted several of them. But there is one on the trajectory of the spacecraft itself.
Okay.
So it's hopefully going to rendezvous with that, possibly a second one. And then, of course, it'll continue to fly, and the speed it's doing will eventually leave the solar system and go into interstellar space. It will never return to the realms of the sun.
Okay.
And on board, there is some ashes from the Pluto's discoverer, Clyde Tombaugh,
Yeah.
and a disk with names of people from Earth, including my own. So our
Perfect.
names are drifting out there.
Wow.
And this spacecraft then will just go into space,
Yeah.
and we will never see it again. And maybe picked up by an extraterrestrial intelligence in 100, 200,000 years' time, perhaps, when they'll see what is essentially an emissary from the human race. The human race may be long gone, but our emissary will be still there, flying through
The
space.
possibilities are endless. So, I
Yes,
mean,
they are.
what do you hope that they'll find?
I think at Pluto, what we're looking at now, what I'm looking forward to, is the possibility there is some sort of volcanic activity there.
Okay.
I mean, is the atmosphere it has just what's called sublimation? That's where the ice is turned straight into a gas without going through a liquid phase.
Okay.
Is that where the atmosphere comes from? Because it's been warming up on part of its
Okay.
orbit, it's now cooling down again. Is it that, or is there some outgassing? And it would be nice to see some outgassing. I
Yeah.
think with the tidal forces we will see that. See if there's any form what's called ice tectonics happening on the surface would be a very exciting thing to see as well. And it would be nice to see the interaction of Charon and Pluto, to see what the dynamics are of that, of a dual planet, a double planet system. You know, it's science fiction come true, this is,
Yeah.
it's just fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that. So it's going to be very exciting over the next 16 months,
Perfect.
seeing the data.